shared with you that last month, my best friend in the world, my best friend in the world, Dan Klepser, who I've known for over 30 years. And as a matter of fact, Dan was so instrumental in my coming to the Lord and learning and growing as a Christian and such, that Dan just last month, out of the blue, Jan, his wife, called me, and she told me that a blood clot. He's a healthy guy, perfectly healthy. His veins were clear. I mean, just all that kind of stuff. He had no heart damage, no nothing. But there's some weird blood clot that got in his system, and it took him out. Just took him out. And it's like, you've got to be kidding me. And of course, we had his funeral. I did his eulogy and one of the pallbearers and just all of that last month. And we were just in Columbus over the Thanksgiving weekend. Of course, my wife and we went over to see Jan, and we were just still all in shock about this. And Dan and Jan are actually supposed to come up this weekend. And of course, they're not. And, Jan's just telling me, she's like, I don't know how I'm going to get through Christmas. And she's just sitting there crying. We're just sitting there at the kitchen table crying, going, we just can't believe this. In it too much for too long.
Boy, that is a great question. Because it is so personal and because it impacts people in such different ways, I hesitate to weigh in on any kind of timeline. I would just encourage people to address what you're feeling in multiple ways, and that is reaching out to others, reaching up to God. I think sometimes it involves getting counseling if you need to, perhaps diet and exercise. I mean, I think physical health is important. I think a very holistic approach to it, but all of that is in the most healthy way, grounded in an honesty that comes from you to others, to God, being willing to really bare yourself. And there's something cathartic and I think healing about honesty.
Yeah. How do you handle the grave site thing? Because some people are like, you get both extremes. Okay, as far some people are like they're out there every day. If they're not pruning the weeds and cutting the grass around it every day, they feel like they're letting their loved one down. Other people, I'll level with you, I'm kind of to the opposite extreme. I hardly ever go to the gravesite of my daughter because I just tend to think of it as it's an empty shell. As I said to my wife, she's no more in that body than she is in her clothes that are in the closet. So to me, it's kind of a logical waste of time because she's not there. Right. But that's not right for everybody.
Agreed, but it's fascinating to me that you brought that up because just last week I was talking with some friends about this. My dad's grave is in Alabama, so I don't get down there often. The first couple of times I went down, I did go visit his grave, and that was a very tough experience. When my grandfather died, he was buried right next to my dad, and that was like piling on.
Right.
But the last time I went down, I did not go visit his grave, and I drove right past it multiple times, and I was thinking about that afterwards. What's different? And I think after 10 years, it's beginning to sink in more than it did before, that, like you said, that is not my dad. That grave marker is just kind of a placeholder, but that's not who my dad is. And for years, it was healing for me in some way to go there and feel like I was talking to Dad.
Right.
But honestly, I wasn't.
Right.
And for my journey, and once again, like you, I'm hesitant to say how it looks for everybody else.
Sure.
I've discovered that the more I have found healing, and the more I have reconnected with God and understood his role as my father, and the more I've caught that vision of the hope of seeing my father again, I'm able to let the geography go and let things up to God.
Yeah. Even though there is something about being at the gravesite, at least early on, to know that you're geographically within so close a proximity, only 6 feet away from their physical shell, But so, all right, hang on just a moment. We'll spend our last few minutes together. I think what do we got? Just a couple of minutes left, I think we have here. So, well, let's do this, Pastor. In our last couple of minutes together, I want to find out from you, what advice would you give for people listening right now that they have lost a loved one, and whether they lost them this year or whether they lost them 5 years ago or 10 years ago. And it's like going into Christmas, I shouldn't be struggling, but I am. What do you say to that person who's just battling right now?
I would say God made you. He knows your emotions. He gave them to you. And what you're feeling in the process doesn't surprise God. And honestly, I think a healthy emotional response, even if it's grief, doesn't dishonor God in any way. I would just encourage people over the holidays, if you're in a setting where you are really feeling the grief poignantly, tell someone just as simple as, I really miss this person.
Hmm.
And if you're a person who knows there's others around you who have lost people, I think don't be afraid to gently say, how you doing?
Right.
How's this holiday feeling for you? And that conversation, I think, brings a lot of connection and hope to people in grief.
Right. Yeah. 'Cause one thing I've found is that I, for me, it's comforting when other people remind you that they haven't forgotten,
Hmm.
because as you know, everybody else, you're the last one to forget,
Yeah.
so, but folks, look for the book. Again, it's entitled Learning to Jump Again, a memoir of grief and hope.